The Second Amendment and university campuses, the pros, the cons, and the questions. Next on Campus Roundup. Hello, I'm Dr. Duke, and this is the Campus Roundup at the College Fix. This week we're looking at the Second Amendment and how it applies to students who really want to protect themselves on college campuses. To talk more about this, we welcome Rita Francesca Lafredo, a student at Binghamton University in New York and a journalist at the College Fix. Rita, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
First, we got to start. Talk about the neighborhood in which Binghamton exists. Talk about the crime rate. Talk about what makes you real nervous about being a student at Binghamton.
Well, again, I currently attend Binghamton University, which lies within one of the highest crime-rated cities in New York and in the country as a whole. It's located in Vestal, just outside of Binghamton. Today, my chances of becoming a victim of violent crime in Binghamton alone is 1 in 116, when in New York, it is 1 in 280.
That's a remarkable statistic because there are obviously places in New York, like Manhattan, that skew those numbers one way. So in a place like Binghamton, you have a university, right, the city surrounding the university. What's the campus climate like on the campus? I know there are campus police there, but what are the crime statistics like for your actual university?
I have been on this campus for the past 2 years after graduating from my local community college, and as I've spent my time here, I have witnessed 2 murders on this campus.
Wow, so there is a problem there that what's happening in the community is spilling over to the campus.
Absolutely.
Now, let me ask you broadly first. We'll narrow our point of focus here. What is the opinion, what is the attitude at SUNY Binghamton to the Second Amendment, as far as you can tell from the administration and the classes you've taken? How do the professors and faculty and administrators view American Second Amendment rights?
From time to time, again, I've witnessed my peers and my professor argue that the only alternative to gun violence is by taking guns away from law-abiding citizens. And another alternative would be, according to them, by abolishing the Second Amendment as a whole instead of fighting for our individual safety.
You, I think very wisely and sanely, you want to take proactive steps. I would think that the university social justice people would see that as proactive, that here you are, a young female who wants to be responsible for her own safety and security, and one of the things you would like to do is to be able to carry a gun responsibly on campus. Have you pushed that at all at the university?
I have not pushed it at all, but I have been elected into my student congress. This was last year. And anytime this topic would come up, the same argument would come that instead of individual safety, we should be focusing on having someone else protect us.
Yeah, that seems really empowering, right? Instead of focusing on individual safety, telling this to a young woman on a campus where all young women are potentially vulnerable, telling a young woman that, don't worry about your own protection, we'll protect you. Was anybody there to protect in the case of these 2 murders?
Not at all. Unfortunately, the person who had killed an engineering student was left out in the public for it was overnight, and they hadn't found him until the following day. And the nursing student who was found murdered right next to our campus, the person who had murdered her was in a different country.
So you have taken a look at this, right? Are you pursuing concealed carry in New York?
I am. I am in the process of working toward concealed carry. Unfortunately, I just turned 21, and in New York, it is a very long process.
And you can't start the process until you turn 21?
Correct.
So that's interesting. Gun ownership in New York is at a higher age than in most places.
Yes.
Interesting, very interesting. During the last year, did you have conversations with other students about potentially what they thought about you doing this when you were in student government?
Yes, I did. Anytime this conversation would arise, it would never be brought forward onto a platform where I could discuss these problems. I personally served on the Internal Affairs Committee, and here I helped bring more conservative organizations to campus. But unfortunately, in order to do so, you need to be chartered. And out of the whole committee, I was the only right-wing Republican, and anytime I would get outvoted to bring organizations like this to campus.
What do you think your next step is going to be to try to bring, if not greater awareness, then real change to the university to allow women like you to take care of yourself?
This summer, I will be attending the Women's Campaign School at Yale University, which will teach me how to become elected in office successfully as a female candidate. And while I'm learning here, following this, I will be pursuing a Juris Doctor. And once acquired, I will fight. I will fight for these rights that we already have.
Rita, I just want to say you are the face of what feminism ought to be. Self-contained, willing to look after yourself, proactive, getting involved, fighting for your rights. I wish, again, campus progressives could see what you're doing as laudable as I think the rest of the country will. Thanks for joining us today. All right, now time for Talking Campus, our weekly discussion with members of the College Fix editorial team. Today I'm joined by College Fix Associate Editor Daniel Payne to talk about Second Amendment issues on campus. Daniel, you've done a lot of really good work talking about gun rights and Second Amendment rights on college campuses. I would start by giving us just an overview. What is the basic attitude that you get from universities, or what is the basic position of most universities on Second Amendment rights for their students?
Yeah, Duke, you probably won't be surprised to hear that it's pretty hostile in most cases. Most universities explicitly outlaw firearms on their campuses. State laws in a lot of states preempt firearms from being brought on any campus, whether the college or university wants to allow it. There are some encouraging signs in places like Texas and some parts of the South that indicate that that sort of hostility may be softening. There are a number of activist efforts, particularly in Texas with Antonia Okafor. She's doing wonderful work educating students on their Second Amendment rights and how to push their colleges and universities to begin respecting those rights on campus. So in general, it's a pretty negative picture for those of us who really support gun rights. But there are some signs that in some places there's a better picture emerging.
Yeah, and the 7 universities I've taught at, the one thing they all have in common is great ideological antipathy to the Second Amendment generally. This is not just, as you mentioned, I think, states preempting this, or we're really just only concerned about not having guns on campus. There's an intellectual bias, it seems to me, against even anyone in America owning guns for private reasons, and that sort of feeds these university positions as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, when you get away from the actual campus policy, you do encounter certainly faculty and administrators and staff who are just really personally opposed to the Second Amendment, who are kind of offended at the idea that somebody might carry a gun on or off campus. And that's the case with a lot of students as well. The progressive bias that you see on so much of campus life certainly applies to the Second Amendment. So, whether we're talking actually being allowed to bring a gun on campus, or whether we're just talking about, the practicality and ideological circumstances of carrying one off campus, in most cases, it's hostility you're going to encounter.
But what do the statistics and the actual research about guns tell us? We know, for instance, that criminals with guns know that universities are prime gun-free zones. But do we have any data on this that would help us understand the question from one perspective or another?
I mean, we have data that indicates that gun owners are, by and large, among the most law-abiding people in the country. Folks with concealed carry permits have incredibly low rates of all of the crimes that we're told you should expect from them. And there's really no reason to think that should be any different for college students on campus. We're given to these predictions of doom and destruction and mayhem whenever we talk about college students bringing their firearms with them into their dorms, or carrying around while they're going to class. But when you think about the fact that these students choose to carry, they're all going through safety courses, firearm handling courses. They're almost certainly going regularly to the shooting range to train. These are the folks that you really want carrying guns, the ones that have taken care to make sure that they are competent and capable and able to do so. So, the evidence off campus indicates that there's nothing to be afraid of, and that would almost certainly be borne out on campus as well.
These universities are big on talk about comfort. We've got to create comfort zones. We've got to create security zones. We have to make sure that kids feel safe. Wouldn't it be interesting if the universities went proactive and said, okay, all right, given the concealed carry law, we will consider allowing students to carry on campus, but they have to take a university course on top of that about how to deal with handguns or weapons on a university campus. I guarantee you there's not a single concealed carry kid who wouldn't take that course as well. Concealed carry kids are the most educated kids about guns in the country. They're the ones who are the most, as you said, the most responsible.
Yeah, and I think that kind of course is a great idea, and I think it's certainly a prerogative of any university that's going to allow guns on campus to insist that those carrying guns are familiar with them and are trained in them and that are up to date on everything they need to be. And yeah, if you offered such a course, it would sell out. You'd have to add 3 or 4 more sections to carry the capacity. So, it's the fact that schools aren't willing to do that they're not willing to allow guns on campus when the students who are carrying them could be properly trained and properly vetted, shows again that it's not just a practical concern. It's not just a fear about student injury. It is genuinely an ideological opposition to guns that is not going to be softened by just hard data.
Well, all of this leads to the $64,000 question. We know that has been seen across the country again and again and again. People who are a little unhinged, people with radical mental issues, they get guns. They have guns. We also know that college campuses are places where, generally speaking, they know they're going to find almost no armed opposition. You add to this now the fact that very woke, progressive student groups on campus are demanding that campus police be unarmed, that no gun-carrying police even be allowed on campus. With all of this, right, all of this signaling going on to those with bad and evil intentions, what does the university say to defend its position that we will not allow students or even teachers and faculty to carry on campus?
They're going to keep it up. I mean, in a lot of cases, the administration dodges the question and is willing to concede that the police should have firearms, but that there's this concern that students bringing well-trained students bringing guns on campus is a danger. So really, it's you can't maintain that sort of cognitive dissonance, those two sort of deferring policies with any honesty. So if you approach the administrators and the administrations and the presidents and the provosts and really ask them, why should cops be allowed to carry guns, but students are not allowed to, trained students are not allowed to, they're just going to pass the buck and kick the can down the road. And you're going to keep having campuses that are less safe than they could be with responsible gun owners on them.
Last question. Why not faculty then? All right, if you want to make a case that kids are not responsible enough or it's too volatile a circumstance for kids to be carrying guns on college campuses, why not arm faculty or allow certain faculty who've been trained over and above what we'd even expect in the public sector? Why not allow them to carry so that when the inevitable happens and somebody brings a gun to campus with malicious intent, you have many options to fight back?
Well, I think the big problem is that most faculty just don't want to do it because they hate guns as much as their students do, and they're afraid of them. But yeah, there are certainly more than a few faculty members, probably at every university who would be willing to do that and who would be capable and who should be allowed to. But again, even offering as tame and as narrow focused a policy as that. It is too much for folks who are philosophically opposed to guns, because even allowing a scant number of university officials to carry guns would be to admit in some way that guns can do good, that in the right hands they can be applied to save lives, and that you shouldn't be afraid of them when good guys are holding them. So if you allow faculty members to carry them, you're conceding that point, and that's just too much for some folks to stomach.
Bingo. And I think your last point sums up the whole thing. Our universities, generally speaking, are more committed to their ideological position on guns than to doing everything they can to protect our nation's college kids. Daniel Payne, it's always a great pleasure to speak with you. Thanks for your work on this topic, and we'll talk to you again soon. And that was a very interesting campus roundup today. We have a really interesting dichotomy between progressives who run universities, including faculty, and their skittishness about guns, their antipathy towards the Second Amendment, and actual students, in this case, a female minority student in a high crime zone university site who is saying, I need to protect myself. You're telling me, university, that you can't protect me. You're telling me to lock my doors, to stay inside. You're telling me that I have to radically restrict the way I operate on your campus because you will not not protect me. This is coming to a head and really quick. It's time to really reconsider what universities mean when they say we want to provide safe spaces for your kids. Unfortunately, in this day and age, a safe space means a place where nobody gets to have free speech and no one's allowed to defend themselves. That's not safety at all. And that's the final fix. Be sure to stay up on all the latest news and information from the College Fix by joining us on all of our many media social platforms. For the Campus Roundup, I'm Dr. Duke, and we'll see you next time.